Since the start of the Barbarossa Plan on June 22, 1941, the German armies, having inflicted a serious defeat on the Soviet troops, advanced quite rapidly. Army Group North, under the command of Field Marshal von Lieb, captured the Baltic states and successfully advanced towards Leningrad. But this was only half the trouble for the USSR. The Germans still had not reached Moscow. However, the entering of the well-prepared Finnish army into the war became a complete disaster. The leadership of the USSR knew that Finland would fight on Hitler's side. The pressure and forces mobilized by Finnish army, reinforced by German divisions in the offensive of Karelia and especially on the Karelian Isthmus, turned out to be unexpected for the leadership of the Red Army. Headquarters had to urgently withdraw troops from the already difficult Moscow directions in order to organize defense in the north. So it was the active participation of the Finnish army in the first stage of the war, which approached Leningrad from the north, that ensured the possibility of the blockade of the city. The Germans hoped to take Leningrad on the move. Having been repelled by units from the Leningrad, Volkhov, and northwestern fronts, where many Leningrad volunteers were fighting, von Lieb resorted to tactics aimed at strangling the city through bombardment, aerial raids, and starvation, which became the primary adversary for Leningrad's residents. The Finns played here, figuratively speaking, the role of a poisonous spider, which added its poison after the snake bite. Blockade. In general, the battle for Leningrad became the longest battle in the entire history of World War II. It spanned from July 10, 1941 to August 9, 1944, exactly 3 years and 1 month. As the Germans approached the city, as always happens, the population began to storm food stores. Queues formed from early morning until closing. They swept everything from the shelves, from bread, salt, sugar, and canned food to bay leaves, kerosene, and matches. However, this did not last long, as stores quickly ran out of stock. Amid the chaos of the summer of 1941, they simply didn't have time to bring substantial supplies into the city. Moreover, on the day of the blockade was established, German aviation managed to bomb and set fire to the Badaev warehouses, the main food storage of the city, with incendiary bombs. Of the 50 warehouses, 40 were completely burned down, and 10 were severely damaged by fire. Eyewitnesses later told about the glow that was visible from all parts of the city and about the specific smell of burning that spread through the city streets. But people kept coming to the area of the former warehouses for a long time. They were cleaning the rubble, hoping to scavenge at least some, even charred provisions. In winter, they hollowed out the frozen ground under the warehouses where sugar was stored. Molten sugar was absorbed into the ground. Pieces of this earth were collected, taken home, thawed, boiled, and filtered through cheesecloth. People then drank the brownish sweet liquid because they needed calories, any calories, regardless of the source. In the city, trams, buses, and all forms of public transportation began to operate unpredictably. This was due to the fact that it began to be used as a freight transport, primarily to supply the front. Trams turned into the ambulance trains, a means of transporting reserves, etc. Many Leningrad citizens, in fact, lived in the factories for weeks, since the working day lasted from morning until late evening, sometimes until night and beyond. And it became unsafe to walk around Leningrad in the evening and at night. Even during the day, it became dangerous to appear in some areas. In challenging times, it's typical for all kinds of jackals in human form to emerge from the shadows. Organized gangs began terrorizing entire districts of the city. Terrifying daily experience. Best of all, the people who survived the blockade will tell us about these terrible days and months. Georgiev Vladislav Georgievich. Once Uncle Volodya brought us 2 packs of yeast, a kilogram each. Grandmother was surprised. Why did we need them? There was no flour anyway. He explained that yeast can be consumed as food. Grind it in a meat grinder, dry it, then cook it like pasta. I still remember what a pleasure it was to drink not just murky water, but with yeast. The smell of this mess was reminiscent of mushroom soup. Gushina Zinaida Petrovna. It is impossible to convey these sensations. You open your eyes in the morning and immediately your stomach starts to ache. Then the sensation intensifies, and a nagging, incessant pain appears if some beast is tearing with the claws. Some went mad because of this pain. They were constantly looking for something to eat. If there is hot water, it's good already. You drink it and feel how it fills everything inside. Alexandrova Margarita Borisovna. During the blockade, I went to kindergarten. My mom worked there. One day, one of the boys shared his cherished dream, a barrel of soup. When his mother heard it, she led him to the kitchen and asked the chief to prepare something. The cook burst into tears and told Mom, "Don't bring anyone else here anymore. There is no food left at all. In the pot, there is only water." Many children in our kindergarten died of hunger. Out of 35, only 11 of us remained. Children had the hardest time. A growing and not yet strong organism requires constant nourishment. Winter of 1941-1942 was the hardest. The road of life across the ice of Lake Ladoga did help a little, but only a little. Movement on the ice was dangerous not only due to the enemy bombardments and shelling, the lake itself was unpredictable, with numerous currents and whirlpools. While they chose the safest route, dozens of cars, many with drivers, drowned. The city was also supplied by air, by planes. But how much can you deliver with the airplanes of that time to a city of 1 million people? Moreover, cargo planes have always needed combat covers from fighters. Each such flight required thorough preparation. Lines from the diary of a schoolgirl. On December 28, 1941, Zhenya died. Grandmother died on January 25, 1942. March 17th, Leka died. Uncle Vasya died on April 13. May 10th, Uncle Losha and Mom. May 15th, Savachevs all died. Only Tanya is left. The established norms of bread and other products in November were reduced to a minimum. Soldiers on the front line received 500 grams of bread per day. Workers 250 grams. Dependents 125 grams. And it could, of course, be loosely described as bread. The blockade bread consisted of the following ingredients besides rye flour: quinoa, malt, oats, barley, bran, and cellulose. Fuel, firewood, and coal were also in short supply, which resulted in the centralized heating and water supply not working. The city switched to wood-burning stoves. Water was sourced from the Neva River, and during winter ice was broken through. A sorrowful scene and cannibalism. Leningrad depicted a sorrowful scene. Emaciated people weakened by hunger were walked around the city. In winter it was quite common to encounter people pulling sleds with the corpses of their relatives. However, many were in no hurry to bury these deceased relatives, keeping them in an apartment in order to continue to receive bread cards for them. Nobody was surprised by anything anymore. Cases of cannibalism have started to occur in the city. Driven mad by hunger, people started eating other people. Armed guards had to be stationed at the morgues. In Leningrad, several gangs of cannibals appeared who ambushed weakened people in the evening, stole children, and turned them into food. Another problem was thieves who stole food stamps. The loss of stamps turned into starvation for many families. Cannibals and thieves faced no formalities, and KVD officers had the authority to shoot scoundrels on the spot upon detention in the case of the slightest resistance or an attempt to flee. For those who reached the court, the investigation and trial were quick, no more than 3-4 days. Sometimes citizens would take the law into their own hand against thieves caught red-handed. The most notorious organized crime gang in besieged Leningrad was the Zigzag Gang, whose members were popularly dubbed Blockade Rats. The leader of the gang was Vitaly Kusharny, a 25-year-old who had already been convicted. In the printing houses where food ration cards were printed, mostly decent, trustworthy people worked. However, the bandits were able to convince the printing house cleaner to cooperate, and in exchange for food, she brought them paper scraps and revealed the type. Thanks to this, criminals gained the ability to print fake stamps. However, thanks to the efforts of the operatives, the gang was caught. During search of their spacious, upscale apartment, authorities seized hundreds of kilograms of assorted goods, hundreds of liters of beer, wine, sunflower oil, and a vast area of valuables including gold items, paintings, icons, furs, and carpets. Kosherny and his closest assistant were shot. The other members of the gang received long sentences. One survivor of the blockade recalled that she gave a gold watch for a piece of butter the size of a walnut. Music. The Germans call Leningrad the city of the dead, but they were wrong. On August 9, 1942, the only remaining orchestra in the city, consisting of starving, half-alive musicians, performed Dmitri Shostakovich's 7th Symphony, which became famous. The whole world listened to the recording of this symphony on the radio. Everyone understood that this music was heard in the besieged city. The wife of the US President Roosevelt, after listening of the symphony, said that she had never heard better music. After. On January 18, 1943, the Leningrad blockade was broken. The losses of the city were terrible. During the blockade, about 650,000 people died in the city from starvation, bombing, and shelling, but most from starvation. During the blockade, about 1.5 million people were evacuated from the city, mostly women, children, sick, and severely wounded on the front. At the time of the blockade breakthrough, about 700,000 residents remained in the city. So the number of victims of the blockade became enormous.